Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christine Rodriguez, and I'm the host of Astrology Now podcast. And so if you enjoy listening to Vedic astrology, keep in mind I'm a Vedic sidereal astrologer. And if you like listening to podcasts while you walk or do chores or do whatever, I do recommend subscribing to my podcast, Astrology Now. And so this segment I'm really excited to record. It's something that I feel very deeply about, almost emotional about, and I was recently inspired to make a video about it. This topic was the first topic I was interested in when I started studying Vedic astrology, and that is spirituality in a Vedic chart. I came to astrology through yoga practices and meditation, so naturally when I saw my chart I was interested in knowing where the spirituality lies and how you can see that. And so the houses for spirituality in a chart are known as the Moksha Houses. The Moksha Houses are houses 4, 8, and 12. Okay, so remember those houses, keep them in mind, 4, 8, and 12. And so the Moksha Houses have to do with liberation, spirituality, transformation, and also disconnect. Okay, and now if you think about that, if you think about houses 4, 8, and 12, the majority of those houses are also Dashtana houses, which are the more negative, malefic houses in your astrology chart. And so when you think about that, most of the time, I'm not saying all of the time, but a lot of the time, people come to spirituality because they've experienced difficulties. Okay, people don't generally seek the spiritual path unless something is uncomfortable or forcing them to seek solace in a higher being or seek transformation, personal development. And all of these are seen from the Moksha Houses. Now, we're going to go through the Moksha Houses and discuss which each means specifically, but there are also the Dharma Houses. And the Dharma Houses have to do with religion, spirituality, and intelligence, and those are also going to play a major role. And we're going to talk about them as well. But when you are analyzing spirituality and religion in a chart, you're going to want to look at the Moksha Houses, which are 4, 8, and 12, and the Dharma Houses, which are 1, 5, and 9. And so the Moksha Houses. The 4th house is the mother, it's your inner security, it's your inner happiness. Now, it represents like your beginning of life. And the 4th house is also said to represent the ending of life as well. Okay, so kind of beginning of the life and also the end of your life is seen from the 4th house. The 8th house, transformation, death, sex, occult knowledge, spirituality, personal transformation, anything that's hidden. Okay, it's the 8th house. It's like the underbelly of the chart, which I'm going to show you in a second. It does show the hidden mysteries of life. If you're watching this video, you probably have some connection to either a Moksha house or the 8th house. And then of course there's the 12th house, and the 12th house is our subconscious mind. It's our creativity. It's isolated places, including ashrams, places of work. Well, 9th house is more places of worship, but being alone, creating time for personal introspection. But it's also a level of disconnect from the material plane. Because you go around the full zodiac wheel, when you're at the very end, in the 12th house, it's a disconnect from this world, disconnect from material possessions, which is extremely spiritualizing. Okay, and now it's also liberation and moksha, separation of this realm. And that's what makes those 3 houses so incredibly spiritual. And I do want to associate the houses with the signs of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. They're the water signs. Okay, so we're associating the water signs as well with spirituality. Now, the next houses I want to talk about when connecting them to spirituality are the Dharma houses. And now Dharma houses are more organized. When you think about organized religion, it's going to be more kind of like a Dharma house, though many spiritual people are going to have connection to the Dharma houses. They are the Dharma houses. And Dharma means following our purpose, fulfilling our mission in life with enthusiasm in alignment to virtues and ethics. Okay, so it's having the will, having the desire to push forward to fulfill a greater meaning. But the word itself is associated to virtues and ethics. So it is very virtuous. It has this connection to higher power, higher being. And we're going to discuss each house individually. And so the first house is yourself, it's your identity, it's your body. It has a lot to do with personal will and personal strength, and literally kind of like the vitality to move forth in your practices. And then the fifth house is the house of creativity. It's the house of romance. Now it's also higher education and intelligence. And there is a connection to the fifth house of the scriptures, the traditional scriptures that have come before us, like the Upanishads or the Yoga Sutras. Now, the ninth house is pilgrimage, traveling far away to seek spirituality, spiritual pursuits. It is also higher education. The fifth house and the ninth house really do have a lot in common. Now, there are several differences there, but they do have a lot in common. The ninth house is a little bit more serious. When you think about the flow of the chart, the ninth house is later than the others, and so it's a little bit more mature. And you can think about that with many of the houses. As they move throughout the chart, they're going to kind of mature on their path. And so the ninth house is the most mature Dharma house. And so there's a maturity to it. There's a grand sense of purpose associated with the ninth house. And a lot of religious leaders who are very much connected to one specific religion are going to generally have a connection to the ninth house. They can be very dogmatic in their beliefs, very extreme and radical in their beliefs can be seen from the ninth house. Whereas with the fifth house, it's the energy just gets channeled in a little bit of a different way, almost gets channeled in a little bit more of a fun or light, what's the word I'm looking for? Creative way, if you will. But they're all Dharma houses, okay? So keep that in mind. And the fifth house is the house of intelligence. I always want to emphasize that when I talk about the fifth house. And counseling as well, communicating with other people, helping them develop. Counseling can be seen from the fifth house. It's kind of like a teacher as well. I should say that gurus are also associated with the ninth house. See, there's a lot of overlap here. So, okay, so having connection with the Dharma houses and the Moksha houses is going to give a person spirituality. Now, if people have planets in the Dharma houses, planets in the Moksha houses, most of the time they're going to be spiritual. Now, because the Moksha houses have that dichotomy going on, you always want to look at the chart holistically, because people with many planets in the 8th house aren't guaranteed to be spiritual. There could be some issues there, some underlying psychological issues, depending on what planet is there, what aspects it's receiving. Same thing with the 12th house. You know, the 12th house can indicate deep spirituality and disconnect from this world, but depending on what planets are there and what aspects are happening, it could be addiction, ending up in jail, committing crimes, okay? You always want to see everything going on. But when there is a connection between the Moksha houses and the Dharma houses, it can very much indicate spirituality. And what I mean by that is if the ruler of the 4th, 8th, or 12th house are in another Moksha house, okay, that's going to be extremely spiritualizing. If the ruler of a Moksha house is in a Dharma house, that is also very spiritualizing. And so you want to see the connections between the Dharma houses and the Moksha houses. And I'm going to show some examples so that you can visually see what I'm discussing. I have a few case studies, and someone actually said that I had too many case studies, but for those of you who are learning astrology, I really want to give you the case studies so that you can see them. The way to learn astrology is to look at charts after charts after charts. And so if you're experienced in astrology, if you're learning astrology and you feel like you kind of have a handle on things, you want to look for the ruler of the Moksha houses, 4, 8, and 12 in a chart. see where that dispositor is. If it's in another moksha house, 4, 8, or 12, it's going to show a lot of spirituality. If it's in a Dharma house, 1, 5, or 9, same. I mean, it's going to show a path of spirituality and religion. Now, same thing with Dharma houses. Look at the dispositor of the Dharma house. If it's in another Dharma house or in a moksha house, there's a tie between religion and spiritual beliefs. Now, we're gonna look at those case studies, because if you can't see it, I don't feel like it's going to be as helpful. So I'm going to show you. Okay. All right. Awesome. So here are the charts. So the first chart that I want to look at is Sadhguru, and I talked about Sadhguru's chart on my segment of Sagittarius, because he does have a moon in Sagittarius. Sadhguru is a world-renowned spiritual teacher. He's written multiple books. He's everywhere, okay? Just look up Sadhguru. He's known for spirituality. He's always been drawn to the spiritual path. He is a great teacher, okay? And so let's check his chart out. So remember, we're looking at the Dharma houses, 1, 5, and 9, and we're looking at the Moksha houses, 4, 8, and 12. So it's all about the dispositor, or a lot to do with the dispositor. Seeing that he has 4 planets in the 4th house as is going to be an indicator. Now, he has Leo ruling his 4th house, which is the sun. The sun rules the sign of Leo. So we find the sun. It's in its own house, okay? So it's in a moksha house. The ruler of his moksha house is in a moksha house. All right, there's tick 1. Now, let's go to the next moksha house, which is his 8th house, ruled by Sagittarius. Now, Jupiter rules Sagittarius, so we want to find where Jupiter is. It goes into a Dharma house. Of course it does. Okay, of teaching, of higher education, of writing books. The 5th house is writing books. Okay, the 3rd house is going to be more like writing articles and smaller things, journaling. The 5th house is writing novels. He's written plenty of novels, okay? Let's go to the 12th house. It's Aries, ruled by Mars. Goes into his 4th house, which is a moksha house. Okay, so of his 3 moksha houses, 2 of the rulers were in moksha houses, 1 of the ruler was in a Dharma house. And then just for fun, you know, we can look at the Dharma houses. 1st house ruler is Taurus. Venus goes into the 5th. It's a Dharma house. His 5th house ruler is Mercury, goes into a moksha house. And then this is kind of the outlier. His 9th house ruler goes into the 7th. But you see that the majority of his 9th house ruler and 4th house ruler are tied up within one another. And that's guaranteeing spirituality. It's guaranteeing religion. Okay, you can absolutely see that in this chart 100%. And so Ananda Maya Ma, we've looked at before. I love her chart. And so she was also a spiritual leader. And so I'm showing you the spiritual leaders first so that I'm affirming that this works. And then I'm going to show you people in the media who aren't necessarily spiritual leaders, but very much spiritual people. And so Ananda Maya Ma is a Pisces rising. Her moksha houses, let's look at them first. Okay, so the 4th house, it's ruled by Mercury. It goes into the 3rd. Okay, all right, you know, it's not, but let's move on. Her 8th house, it's Libra, ruled by Venus, goes into a Dharma house. Next moksha house is the 12th house. It's Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, goes into a moksha house. Okay, so her moksha houses are tied up with Dharma houses or moksha houses for the most part, regardless of this 4th house. Now let's look at her Dharma houses. 1st house ruler is Jupiter. Goes into the 5th house, another Dharma house, exalted. Dharma house ruler of the 5th, Cancer, rules the moon. Goes into her 9th house, okay? A Dharma house. Dharma house, Scorpio, ruled by Mars, goes into her 12th house. It's a Dharma house. So you see that the majority of her moksha houses are connecting. The majority of her Dharma houses are connecting. I mean, look at that. Dharma house 1 to Dharma house 2, Dharma house 2 to Dharma house 3, and then Dharma house 3 goes to moksha 3. So, you know, hopefully you're seeing this pattern, and let me know in the comments if this is helpful. I know that it can be a little bit over your head if you don't know the rulers of the signs, but once you know the rulers of the signs, you're going to see what I'm referring to. And it's going to make a lot more sense. Okay, but let's go to George Harrison. So George Harrison wrote the song Sweet Lord, where he's talking about her, talking to God, talking to Krishna, Rama. It's absolutely phenomenal. And he was a deeply spiritual person. He was known for being deeply spiritual. Let's check it out. Let's look into this a little bit. So Dharma house number 1, his first house is Libra, ruled by Venus. It goes to the 6th house. Okay, that's fine. Let's keep digging. His 4th house is Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. It goes into the 2nd moksha house. Okay, and now the ruler of this moksha house, of course, it doesn't necessarily affirm this. But let's go to his last moksha house. It is ruled by Mercury. Mercury goes into the 4th house. Okay, so far the ones that we can connect are the 4th house ruler, which is a moksha house, going to the 8th house, which is a moksha house, and then the 12th house ruler, which is a moksha house. Golly, I'm going to tie up my tongue. The 12th house ruler, which is ruled by Mercury, goes into the 4th house, which is another moksha house. Okay, so we're seeing that 2 of his moksha house rulers are being tied up in moksha houses. That's very spiritually eye-opening, okay? Now, let's look at his Dharma houses. We already did the 1st house. The 5th house is Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. So his Dharma house is being connected to his moksha house. And then his 9th house, the last Dharma house, is ruled by Mercury. It goes into his 4th house, which is a moksha house. You see this theme. Okay, we're going to do one more. I had a few more that I wanted to do, but I thought this one was mind-blowing. As we know, Jim Carrey has recently had a spiritual awakening. I believe it was in 2017. I think that it would be amazing to look at what he was going through at that time and do a video on his spiritual awakening. But he was born to be spiritual. He was born to have the spiritual awakening, and I'm going to show you why. First, I preach about this on my podcast all the time. If you have moon in your 8th house, that in and of itself is going to show a deep interest in spirituality, a deep interest in occult sciences. Now, it can be dark, it can be painful, and Jim Carrey actually has experienced a lot of difficulties emotionally. Okay, remember, the moksha houses, especially 8 and 12, they can give difficulties that push us towards the spiritual path a lot of the time. Okay, so let's look at his first Dharma house. It's Libra, ruled by Venus, goes into a moksha house. 2nd Dharma house, ruled by Aquarius, goes into a moksha house. Last Dharma house, ruled by Mercury, goes into a moksha house. 4th house is his first moksha house, ruled by Saturn, stays in a moksha house. 2nd moksha. His 8th house is ruled by Taurus, Venus, goes into a moksha house. Final moksha, Virgo, ruled by Mercury, goes into a moksha house. So everything is connected to his moksha house. I mean, this is surreal in and of itself, just having this many planets in Capricorn. But obviously, we see very deep spirituality in Jim Carrey, and there are other indicators in the chart that we're not going to go into. This video was specifically to show you the connection between the moksha houses and Dharma houses. And so I know it was a lot. I know that the end got a little bit quicker, but I believe in your intelligence, and I think that you all were able to pick it up. But so when analyzing charts, always take that into account. And the majority of the people seeking an astrology reading are going to have these connections. Now, if you're looking at a chart and maybe the indicator is there, but you feel like this person is deeply spiritual and you're trying to figure it out, Chandra Lagna. Turn the chart so that the moon is in the 1st house and read it that way. Do the connections the same way. A lot of the time, if in the birth chart it's not super strong, like we were seeing today, if you turn the chart so that the moon is in the 1st house, that's definitely going to give you insight into someone's spirituality. And I should also say that the 9th house, as we were seeing with these guys, George Harrison, he had Jupiter. I'm looking at the 9th house. Jim Carrey didn't have any planets. Sadhguru didn't have any. Anandama had the moon. The ninth house does have a lot to do with dogma and rules and regulations. A lot of the time when people have many planets in the ninth house, it's going to be more like someone of Pope Francis. Okay, Pope Francis, he's Catholic and helped so many people, and he is very much affiliated with an organized religion. Okay, and then there are people like Jim Carrey, who has all these planets in a Moksha house. You always want to look at everything, but I'm going to say a lot of the time, if many planets are in Moksha houses like this, people can be open to many different types of spirituality. They're not going to be hanging on to one thing. I think that Jim Carrey has even said, I'm a Christian, I'm Hindu, I'm Muslim, I'm Buddhist, etc. So a lot of the times, the Moksha houses are going to be connected to more of that fluidity, whereas the Dharma houses, especially the ninth house, is going to be a little bit more structured in their beliefs. And so that's just something to look out for. And so if you would like to learn more or get a reading with me and assess your Moksha and Dharma houses, you can email me at astrologyNowPodcast@gmail.com. You can visit my website, Innerknowing.yoga. There's no .com, Innerknowing.yoga. Please follow my Instagram, AstrologyNow_podcast, and on Twitter, AstrologyNow_. Again, my name is Christine Rodriguez. Thank you so much. The Moksha houses are houses 4, 8, and 12. Okay,